My name's Jake Thompson, and before I dive into the rough story I'm about to share, let me give you a little background about my ex-wife, Emily. Every morning, without fail, I make it a habit to run a couple laps around the park. I'm around 5'10", weighing about 180 pounds, and I've always made sure to keep myself in good shape. I swim a few miles every week, hit the gym regularly, and even practice mixed martial arts with a trainer, which helps me stay in solid condition. Folks even tell me I kind of look like a younger George Clooney, though I'm not entirely sure about that. Hard work ain't something I shy away from either. I earned myself a master's degree in computer tech, a postgraduate degree in business management, and a bachelor's in economics, all from Oxford University. My dad was working as a translator for the U.S. Embassy back then, so I stuck around overseas to finish my studies while he returned home after his service. These days, I run a tech company that deals in all kinds of software solutions, from gaming apps to advanced military systems. Business is good, and our latest product should be ready to roll out in about 6 months. Now, besides my work, there's someone else who means the world to me, my younger sister, Hannah. We've always been super close, sharing everything with each other. She's a junior partner at a top-tier law firm in New York, and I'm really proud of her. We've always got each other's backs. Then, there's Emily, my ex. She's about 5'3", slim, weighing around 110 pounds, with this striking red hair and the kind of green eyes that could stop you in your tracks. She's a corporate attorney, climbing the ladder at a big advertising firm. Funny enough, we met through my sister, Hannah. Hannah and Emily's sister were roommates in college, and we got introduced at a graduation party. Turns out we were both living in the same town, Freestone, Texas, just a few miles apart. We started dating, and within 6 months, we were married. Back then, Emily was just starting out at her law firm, and I was working at a company that made flight control software. Life was pretty comfortable. I wasn't raking in a fortune, but the house I lived in was one my grandparents left me, in a decent neighborhood, so we were doing all right. We even managed to take a couple of vacations each year. Things were good for a while at least. 2 years into our marriage, Emily landed a promotion and became a junior partner at her firm. That's when things began to change. She started staying out late with coworkers more often, going out for drinks with the girls, and spending way more time at the office. Naturally, I started getting suspicious. I'm not the kind to jump to conclusions, but something just didn't sit right. So, yeah, I snooped around a bit, checked her emails, scanned through her phone, and even installed a keystroke recorder on her laptop. I know it sounds crazy, but my gut was screaming at me. One night, I even followed her, but she didn't do anything suspicious. Still, something felt broken between us, and I couldn't shake that feeling. We had talked about starting a family, but Emily wanted to hold off until she became a senior partner. She said it would take another 5 years. Meanwhile, I was stuck in a dead-end job, with no sign of moving up the ladder. Frustrated with my career, I made the decision to start my own computer repair business. Though not your average repair shop. I wanted to focus on businesses that needed top-tier security and system upgrades. I did my homework, crunched the numbers, and knew the first year would be rough. But after that, I'd be earning more than I ever had. When I told Emily about my plans, she wasn't on board. She didn't see why I'd take such a huge risk when we were already financially comfortable. Sure, she was doing great, but I wasn't. My job felt like a dead end, and I needed more. So, despite her objections, I quit my job and threw myself into building that business. The first few months were tough, and I burned through most of my savings. But after about 3 months, I broke even, and things were finally falling into place. That's when Emily dropped a bombshell. She was 3 months pregnant, and not just with one baby, twins. Now, finding out Emily was pregnant should have been one of the happiest moments of my life, but something felt off. As soon as she told me, my mind started spinning. The timing didn't add up. Just a few months before, she'd been in Miami for a week on a business trip, supposedly meeting with a big client. But something about it kept bugging me. I couldn't shake the feeling that she hadn't been faithful. So I made up my mind right then and there. I'd get a DNA test once the twins were born. I needed to know the truth. Emily's attitude toward me changed almost right after she found out she was pregnant. She shut down all intimacy between us, saying she wanted to be cautious for the sake of the babies. Even though her doctor said everything was fine, she insisted we keep our distance. So there I was, staring down 6 months of emotional isolation, with her mood swinging all over the place. It was frustrating, to say the least. I did everything I could to support Emily during the pregnancy. I went to every prenatal class, rubbed her feet each night, and even massaged her swollen belly with oils, doing my best to be the picture-perfect husband. But despite all that, the gap between us only seemed to widen. Meanwhile, my business was starting to pick up. I had just hired a young guy named Adam, fresh out of college, to help with the smaller projects. He was sharp, eager to learn, and things were moving in the right direction for the company. At home, though, I stopped talking about work altogether. Emily didn't seem interested, and it just wasn't worth the effort anymore. She'd ask how things were going, but I could tell she wasn't really listening. Her mind was somewhere else. Then, the day finally arrived. I was in the middle of a meeting with a client, discussing a server upgrade, when my phone rang. Emily was in labor. I grabbed her go bag and, more importantly, the DNA test kit I'd secretly ordered, and rushed to the hospital. I made it just in time. Emily had already been admitted, and the nurses told me it could still be a while before the babies were born. As I sat there waiting with her, I felt torn. Part of me was excited, hoping the twins were mine, that I was about to become a father to two beautiful girls. But that nagging doubt still lingered. I kept thinking back to that week she spent in Miami, replaying everything in my head. Hours went by, and eventually, a nurse suggested I go home and rest, assuring me I'd have time to make it back before the babies arrived. I tried to sleep, but kept waking up, checking my phone over and over again for any updates. Then, at around 3:30 in the morning, the call came. Emily was fully dilated, and the contractions were just minutes apart. I jumped out of bed, drove like a madman, and made it back just in time to witness the birth of my two daughters. Watching them take their first breaths was surreal, and for a brief moment, all my doubts seemed to disappear. But as soon as the nurses turned their backs to clean Emily up, I quickly swabbed each of the girls for the DNA test. I hated myself for doing it, but I had to know. Emily, exhausted but glowing, looked up at me with tired eyes and whispered that she loved me. I kissed her forehead, but deep down, something felt hollow. I wanted to believe everything was fine, but I couldn't let go of that nagging feeling. The DNA test would give me the answers I needed. Emily ended up staying in the hospital for a few more days due to complications from the delivery. She had some tears that needed to heal, and during those days, she seemed distant. I tried my best to comfort her, but she was withdrawn, almost like she wasn't really there with me. The doctor said it wasn't uncommon for new moms to feel detached after giving birth, but something just felt off. Emily wasn't the same person anymore. Every time I visited, she'd be quieter, and even when I brought flowers or tried to talk about our future, she barely responded. After 5 days, Emily and the twins were finally ready to be discharged. I was so excited to bring my family home. That morning, I spent hours making sure the house was spotless, the car seats were properly secured, and the nursery was perfect. I wanted everything to be just right for their return. At around 3:30 in the afternoon, I drove to the hospital to pick them up. But when I got to Emily's room, it was empty. Panicking, I asked the nurse where they were, and she told me another man had already taken them. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I thought it had to be a mistake. I called Emily's phone, but it went straight to voicemail. That's when a wave of panic hit me, like a ton of bricks. I reported the situation to the head nurse, and they immediately called security. After reviewing the hospital security footage, my worst fear was confirmed. I saw Emily leaving with some guy, willingly. She had walked out of that hospital with him, like she didn't have a care in the world. The hospital staff called the police, and when the detectives arrived, they took over the situation. They were able to identify the man in the footage, but they wouldn't tell me who he was. All they would say was that Emily and the kids were safe, but I wasn't allowed to know where they were. I was crushed. I drove home in a daze, my mind spinning, not knowing what to do. A few hours later, I was sitting on the couch, staring blankly at the TV, when there was a knock on the door. 2 detectives were standing there. The male detective broke the news to me. Emily had left me and taken the kids. She had no intention of coming back. He said her attorney would be in touch and advised me to stay calm, warning me not to do anything rash. I was completely shattered. My whole world had crumbled in an instant. The next morning, I woke up feeling numb, like everything that had happened wasn't real. It felt like I was trapped in a nightmare I couldn't escape. After crying myself to sleep the night before, I dragged myself out of bed, took a shower, and tried to make breakfast, but everything I did felt mechanical, like I was just going through the motions. I figured maybe her parents would know something, so I called her dad, Bob. He answered in his usual cheerful tone, clearly unaware of what had just gone down. When I told him what happened, the shock in his voice was unmistakable. He couldn't believe Emily would do something like that. Frank, Rachel's dad, promised to try and reach out to her and get back to me. For a moment, I felt a flicker of hope, but it didn't last long. The rest of the day was a blur. I tried keeping myself busy, even ended up at Denny's, wolfing down a greasy burger with fries and a cold beer, hoping maybe it would cheer me up. It didn't. When I got back home, the silence was unbearable. I checked the answering machine, hoping for a message, but there was nothing. I turned on the TV, though I wasn't really watching. My mind was stuck on a loop, replaying the last few days over and over again. How had everything fallen apart so quickly? What was I supposed to do now? I had no answers, and Rachel still wasn't returning my calls. The next day, my phone rang. It was Rachel's attorney, asking if I could come in for a meeting that afternoon. I agreed, thinking maybe I'd finally get some answers or at least some clarity. I showed up right on time, and to my surprise, Rachel wasn't alone. Sitting beside her, looking smug as ever, was her boss, Adam Prescott. I sat down, keeping my mouth shut, waiting for them to explain what was going on. Rachel's lawyer, this cold, detached, middle-aged guy, was the first to speak. Mr. Thompson, we're here to discuss the terms of your divorce from Mrs. Emily Thompson. He slid a folder across the table toward me. Mrs. Thompson and Mr. Prescott have a proposal for you. My heart sank. Divorce? We hadn't even talked about that yet. I opened the folder and skimmed through the papers, hardly able to wrap my head around what I was reading. The proposal was straightforward. Emily would file for divorce on the grounds of irreconcilable differences. I'd keep my business, my house, my retirement savings. We'd each walk away with what we came into the marriage with. But there was a catch. I had to sign away my parental rights to the twins, allowing Adam Prescott to adopt them. In return, Prescott would deposit $2 million into my account. I was furious. They thought they could just buy my kids like they were some kind of deal to be made. I stood up so fast, I nearly knocked the table over. No way in hell, I said, glaring at both of them. My kids aren't for sale. Emily finally spoke up, her voice soft, almost like she was pleading with me. Jake, I know this is hard, but I never wanted to hurt you. Adam and I have been together for a while now, and we want to get married. He can't have kids of his own, and he wants to adopt ours. They'll have a great life with him, everything they could ever want. What can you offer them? A small computer repair business and an old house. Her words stung, but I wasn't backing down. I had fought too hard and sacrificed too much to just walk away from my daughters. You don't get it, Emily, I said, barely able to keep my voice steady. I'm not selling my kids, and I'm not giving up my rights. If you want to take this to court, go ahead. I'll fight you every step of the way. Her face turned cold. If you don't sign, I'll take everything. I'll drag you through the courts, take half your income, half your savings, and I'll make sure you never see the kids again. I leaned in, staring her down. You can try, but you've got no claim on the house. It's mine. I don't have any savings left, and you make more than I do. So good luck with that. I'll happily pay child support, but I'm not walking away from my girls. Without waiting for another word, I turned and walked out, leaving them both sitting there, stunned. I headed straight back to Denny's, ordered a beer, and tried to calm myself down. I couldn't believe the nerve of Emily and Prescott. They really thought they could bully me into giving up my daughters for a couple $1,000,000. Not a chance. Later that night, after I'd finally settled back in at home, there was a loud knock at my door. I didn't even bother to check who it was through the peephole before opening it. Big mistake. The second the door swung open, 3 guys barged in. I barely had time to react before one of them grabbed me by the throat and slammed me against the wall. Sign the papers, or we'll be back, their leader growled, his face inches from mine. His breath reeked, and the threat in his voice was clear. But instead of backing down, I fought back. I slammed my forehead into his nose, feeling a satisfying crunch as blood splattered across my face. Before I could get another hit in, one of the other guys cracked me across the leg with a baseball bat, and I crumpled to the floor. They beat me while I was down, but I tried to leave some marks on them for the cops. The last thing I remember, before blacking out, was their leader clutching his bleeding nose, cursing me out, and promising they'd be back if I didn't cooperate. Before passing out, I managed to dab some of his blood onto a handkerchief for evidence. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed, completely disoriented. My entire body felt like I'd been hit by a truck. As my eyes slowly adjusted to the light streaming in through the window, I noticed a familiar face sitting nearby. It was Cam, the wife of my MMA instructor, Nick. "Welcome back to the land of the living," she said with a half-smile, walking over to press the call button for the nurse. I tried to speak, but my throat was so dry that I could barely croak out a sound. She handed me some ice chips to chew on, which helped a bit. "Nick and I have been here since they brought you in," she said softly. "You gave us all a scare." A nurse came in, checked my vitals, and smiled. "You're lucky to be awake," she said. 3 days in a coma is no joke." 3 days? I couldn't believe it. The last thing I remembered was that thug's face before everything went dark. I tried to piece together what had happened, but my mind was a fog. Not long after, Nick came in, and I asked him to fill me in. "You got pretty messed up," he said. "The neighborhood watch found your front door wide open and you lying in a pool of your own blood. They called an ambulance, and the cops are investigating. You got some serious injuries: a fractured rib, broken shin, a punctured lung, and a shattered radius in your arm. You're in rough shape." Despite it all, I couldn't help but laugh when Nick cracked a joke, saying, "Other than that, you're doing great." It hurt to laugh, but it also felt strangely good. At least I was alive. A detective named Graham showed up soon after. He asked me what I remembered about the attack. I told him everything, especially the part where their leader demanded I sign the papers. His eyes lit up when I mentioned I had managed to get some of the guy's blood on my handkerchief. He bagged it as evidence and said they'd be in touch soon. The next few days passed in a blur of hospital visits and medication. Nick offered to let me stay at his place once I was discharged, and I gladly accepted. I wasn't ready to go back to that house. Not after what had happened. The idea of being there alone made my skin crawl. Nick also did me another favor. I asked him to check my mail, and a few days later he brought back a stack of envelopes, including the one I had been dreading, my DNA test results. With shaky hands, I opened the envelope and read the results. It was exactly what I feared. Neither of the twins were mine. Rachel had been cheating on me, not just with Adam Prescott, but apparently with someone else too. My mind spun as I tried to process it all. I had been deceived from the very start. I told Nick what the results said, and he nearly fell out of his chair. "Man," he said, shaking his head, "that's some next-level betrayal. She was playing you and Prescott at the same time. Unreal." As I sat there, staring at the test results, a strange sense of relief washed over me. The truth hurt, but at least I knew. I had been right all along. Something had been off, and now I had proof. Rachel's betrayal ran deeper than I ever imagined, and I was completely done with her. I called my lawyer, Grace, and asked her to set up a meeting with Rachel, Prescott, and their attorney. I had a new plan. Grace worked fast, and within a few days, we had the meeting scheduled at a neutral office space. When I showed up in my wheelchair, still bandaged and sore from the attack, the look on Rachel's face was priceless. She hadn't expected to see me in that condition. Once we were all seated, I laid it out for them. "I've changed my mind," I said coldly, watching their expressions. "After some friends of yours paid me a visit, I decided I'm not going to sign away my rights to my kids. And don't bother denying it. Adam, I know you sent those thugs." Prescott tried to act shocked, but he was terrible at it. "I don't know what you're talking about," he stammered, but I wasn't buying it. "I've got your guy's DNA," I said, smiling as I slid a piece of paper across the table. "So, unless you want me to go to the police with that, I suggest you back off." Then I handed over the new documents Grace had prepared. "Here's the deal. I keep my house, my savings, and my business. Rachel, you'll be paying me spousal support, since you make more than I do. And as for you, Adam, you and your company are going to compensate me for breaking up my marriage." Rachel's face turned white, and Prescott looked like he was about to blow a fuse. "You'll also be covering all my medical bills, legal fees, and any aftercare I need," I continued. "The total comes to $10 million, and you've got until Friday at 5 p.m. to pay up." Prescott scoffed. "You're out of your mind if you think we're giving you that kind of money." I smiled. 20%. He frowned, confused. "What?" That's the amount of income your company stands to lose when word gets out about how you wrecked my marriage and kept me from my kids, I said calmly. I've done my homework. You got a lot of big-name clients who won't want to be anywhere near you once this story hits the press. And let's not forget, your dad's running for re-election on a family values platform. I'm sure voters would love to hear about all this. Prescott's face went pale. He knew I was right. After a long, tense silence, he finally agreed to pay, but I could see the gears turning in his head, trying to figure out a way out of this. As I left that meeting, I could feel Rachel's eyes on me, filled with guilt and regret, but I didn't care anymore. I was done with her, done with all of it. After that meeting, things moved quickly. Prescott's company wired the money into my lawyer's account before the Friday deadline, just like I'd demanded. I was officially a rich man, richer than I'd ever dreamed. But the victory felt hollow. No amount of money could give me back the years I'd lost or heal the pain Rachel had caused. Still, it was a step toward getting the justice I needed. I stayed with Nick and Cam for a few weeks while I healed up. They were incredible, treating me like family and making sure I was taken care of. I couldn't have asked for better friends. Cam even gave me space to rest and figure out my next move. Meanwhile, Grace, my lawyer, was busy working on the next phase of our plan. We filed a series of lawsuits against Prescott's company and Rachel, making sure everything was airtight. There was no way I was letting them get away with what they'd done to me. I wanted to hit them where it hurt most, their money and their reputation. During my recovery, I had a lot of time to think, and as much as I wanted revenge, I realized rebuilding my life was what really mattered. Surprisingly, Amy, Rachel's sister, had become a big part of that process. Over the months since everything had gone down, Amy and I had grown closer. Really close. She was nothing like Rachel. Where Rachel was cold and calculating, Amy was warm, kind, and always had a smile for me. During my recovery, she was there for me every step of the way, and it became clear that what we had was more than just friendship. One night, after a long day of physical therapy, Amy and I were sitting on the couch, watching some old movie. She leaned over, rested her head on my shoulder, and said, "Jake, I'm really glad we've gotten to know each other better. I've always thought you were a great guy, and now," she trailed off, but I knew what she meant. I turned to her, smiling softly. "I feel the same way," I admitted. "I never thought I'd end up here, especially after everything with Rachel. But with you, it's different. You've been there for me in ways I didn't even know I needed." Before I knew it, we were kissing, and for the first time in months, I felt something other than anger or bitterness. I felt hope. That night, Amy stayed over, and it felt like a weight had been lifted off my chest. I wasn't alone anymore. I had someone who actually cared about me, not for what I could provide, but for who I was. As we spent more time together, our relationship deepened. We were cautious, not wanting to rush into anything, but it was clear that this was the real deal. I hadn't just found a new partner. I'd found someone I could trust completely, someone who was my equal. Meanwhile, the legal side of things was moving forward. Grace had been brilliant, making sure all the right pieces were in place. Prescott was still reeling from the media firestorm I'd unleashed. News of his affair with Rachel and the shady dealings of his company spread like wildfire. And it only got worse for him. His father, the congressman, got caught up in the scandal too. It was all over the news, and their family's reputation was in tatters. Then came the final blow. The DNA test results came in, proving the twins weren't mine. They were Troy Simmons, Rachel's old boss. I had suspected it for a while, but having the hard evidence in my hands hit differently. I sent a copy of the results to Prescott, along with a note that simply said, "Do the math." It didn't take long for him to figure it out. Rachel had been cheating on him too. Within weeks, Prescott kicked Rachel out, and she lost everything. I heard through the grapevine that she tried to go to her parents for help, but they refused to take her in. She was on her own, no job, no home, and no way to see the twins. Prescott had kept the kids, and without any legal ground to stand on, Rachel had no claim to them. Amy and I decided to take things a step further. We drove over to see Rachel's parents and had to sit down with them. As much as Rachel had hurt me, I believe her parents deserved to know the full truth. I told them everything, the affairs, the lies, and the twins. Then I asked them to forgive her, even if I couldn't. Her dad, Frank, was devastated. Frank had always believed Rachel was the perfect daughter. and hearing the truth shattered him. I could see how much they loved their grandchildren, though, and how desperate they were to see them again. I encouraged them to reach out to Prescott and try to make amends for the sake of the kids. I didn't know if it would work, but at least I tried. As for Rachel, she had completely dropped off the radar. No one knew where she was, and to be honest, I didn't care. She had made her choices, and now she was living with the consequences. Meanwhile, things between Amy and me grew stronger every day. She moved in with me, and we started talking about our future, about starting a family and building a life together. For the first time in a long while, I felt like there was light at the end of the tunnel. My business was booming, I had Amy by my side, and I was finally healing, both physically and emotionally. The revenge had been satisfying, but in the end, it was the love and support I found in Amy that truly helped me move past the pain Rachel had caused. We began planning our wedding, and as the months went by, I realized everything I had gone through had led me to this moment. I was finally free from the past and ready to move forward. About a year after everything had blown up, Amy and I got married. The wedding was beautiful, small, and intimate, with just our closest family and friends. It was nothing like the flashy, over-the-top wedding Rachel had wanted years ago. Amy wasn't into big, showy displays. She just wanted to celebrate our love with the people who truly mattered. We had the ceremony at a local church, and afterward, we held a simple reception at a cozy little venue. My sister, Hannah, was my best man, and Amy's sister, Patty, stood as her maid of honor. The day was filled with laughter, love, and joy, a stark contrast to everything that had come before. After the wedding, Amy and I took a 2-week honeymoon in the Caribbean. We sailed around the islands, basking in the sun and soaking in the peace we had both fought so hard to find. It was exactly what we needed, a complete escape from the chaos of the past year. When we returned, life settled into a comfortable new rhythm. I was wealthier than I had ever imagined, thanks to the settlements from Prescott and the deals I'd signed with several companies for my tech business. My company was thriving, and I hired a team of experts to handle the day-to-day operations, leaving me free to focus on what truly mattered, my new life with Amy. Not long after we got back from the honeymoon, Amy and I received life-changing news. She was pregnant. When she told me, we both cried tears of joy. After everything I had gone through with Rachel, I was finally getting the chance to be a father, and this time I had no doubt that it was real. We were going to start a family together, and I couldn't have been happier. 9 months later, our son, James, was born. Holding him in my arms for the first time was a moment I'll never forget. All the pain, betrayal, and heartache I had carried for so long, it all melted away. James was my future, and with Amy by my side, I knew we were going to give him the best life possible. A year later, our daughter, Sarah, was born, and we moved into a bigger house in the same secure community. Life had come full circle, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I truly had everything I ever wanted. The money, the success, the revenge. It all paled in comparison to the love and happiness I had found with Amy and our children. Through the grapevine, I heard that Rachel had tried to reach out to her parents again, but they had finally cut ties with her. Frank wired her a couple $1,000s and told her not to contact them anymore. She had hit rock bottom, and frankly, she deserved it. In the end, everything I had set in motion worked. Prescott's political career was ruined. His father, the congressman, had to resign due to health issues not long after the scandal broke. Later, it was revealed he had been misusing campaign funds. He ended up serving 3 years in prison for embezzlement and other charges tied to financial misconduct. As for Prescott himself, he faced his own downfall. After a lengthy legal battle, he was convicted of attempted human trafficking for trying to buy the twins from me. He served 5 years in prison, and his company collapsed as clients dropped them left and right after the scandal. As for Rachel, she disappeared from the public eye entirely. I don't know where she ended up, and honestly, I don't care. She's nothing but a ghost from a life I left behind. With all the money I had made from the settlements and my business ventures, Amy and I were more than comfortable. We lived a quiet, happy life, raising our children and giving back to the community through various charities. I had found peace, something I never thought was possible after everything I'd been through. We had found our peace, and while the revenge had its moments of satisfaction, It was the love and new life I built with Amy that brought me the most joy. In the end, Rachel and Prescott were nothing more than lessons in betrayal. Hard, painful lessons, but ones that made me stronger and wiser. I came out of it with a future brighter than I ever imagined. As for the past, well, I left it right where it belonged, behind me. To all you listeners out there, thank you for your amazing support and for tuning into my stories on YouTube. Your enthusiasm and feedback mean everything to me. Stick around for more exciting tales to come. Warm regards.